participate in 6 meetings total today. We will start with a special meeting for expulsions, followed by a closed session for security system plans, and then a closed attorney-client session, which will open and close in the public, but the actual session is closed. We will then stay here in the boardroom for the next 3 meetings, workshops, special meeting, and our tentative budget adoption, which will take place at 5:05 p.m. time certain. We will now call the special meeting for expulsions to order. Mrs. Bass, would you please take the roll?
District 1, Barbara McQuinn. Here. District 2, Chuck Shaw. Here. District 3, Karen Brill. Here. District 4, Erica Whitfield. Here. District 5, Frank Barbieri.
Here.
District 6, Marcia Andrews.
Here.
District 7, Deborah Robinson.
Here.
Okay, we have quorum. All 7 board members are present. Mr. Superintendent, do you wish to withdraw any items?
No, Mr. Chair, at this time, I do not wish to withdraw any items.
Board members wish to pull any item off the agenda, off the consent agenda? Dr. Robinson? You're correct.
I want to pull X043.
Turn your microphone on.
It sounds right, yeah.
All right, any others? Okay, we need a motion to approve the agenda as modified.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Shaw, second by Mrs. Andrews. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Superintendent, that takes us to, no, let's approve the consent agenda, right? I have a motion to approve the consent agenda. We need a motion to approve the consent agenda by Mrs. Whitfield, second by Dr. Robinson. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Now, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I recommend the board expel student 18/19-X-043 from the regular public school program of the School District of Palm Beach County for 1 calendar year.
Motion by Ms. Brill, second by Mr. Shaw. Discussion, Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So this is a student that's recommended for expulsion because of their second offense of possession of a drug, right? And as I recall our conversation about changes in the expulsion policy and process, 6 months from now, this would not come before us, as I understand. So I need affirmation or clarification from legal.
The question is whether in the future, if the policy changes as proposed would be implemented, that an offense like this would not come before the board, it would be dealt with administratively?
Yes,
Is that
and
the question?
it would not be an expulsion. It would be dealt with as not a non-expulsion
Ms. Carmona.
offense.
Yes, under the, this matter, of course, came before us under our current expulsion and our last year's code of conduct. So under our code of conduct as it stands, it is an expellable offense. It's a second offense. In the future, once we adopt a new code of conduct and revise our expulsion policies, we're contemplating that these matters would then go before a disciplinary committee who would be able, and they would be able to make a recommendation for these students to enter into an alternative school placement rather than expulsion.
Dr. Robinson?
Okay. So the answer is correct, right? Okay.
And it's, well, we have not adopted the policy yet.
I said based upon our prior conversation, I understand it has not been adopted. I'm just trying to check my reality and my recollection of prior board conversation. Okay.
That was the conversation.
So if I wait for other board members to speak if they choose to, otherwise I'll place a motion on the table.
Ms. Whitfield?
So based on that, would it be appropriate for us to table this specific expulsion until that policy has been adopted? Would that give this child the full opportunity to see what we end up adopting as policy? And if we were to do that, does that mean that the child is in limbo for longer than he or she should be?
So if I may, this incident occurred on February 19th. The hearings were delayed due to non-appearance by the parent at the hearing, and we gave them the courtesy of resetting the hearing. A new policy would likely not be adopted till late this fall, and it would not be implemented. The idea, I believe, as it was presented, the goal was for a new policy to be implemented in January.
Ms. Whitfield?
So if it's February 19th, that means he or she, I don't remember. I'll say she, I don't remember. So she is out until next February 19th, so that's a full year. So, no, she's not?
He or she.
The student would
Okay.
be able to return for second semester. We return them at natural breaks.
So January.
Correct.
So if we don't enact the expulsion, they are still sitting in a alternative program right now.
I need to look at this specific student's records, but that's where we would have placed them. Yes, ma'am.
So nothing really would change in their life except for the official expulsion documentation, which could be presented to us again after we finalize the policy in late fall. There would still be time.
There would be. I would though remind the board that there was a hearing held on this matter, and there was a recommended order. We did have some findings of fact in which the student did have a first offense, did not go to the alcohol and tobacco rehabilitation program, and then reoffended again within a matter of months.
So I think really what it comes down to is that an expulsion on your record is a pretty harsh thing. And if he or she can still put this time in doing the time at the alternative school without having to have an expulsion on the record, as a board, we should make every effort to make that happen. So we should wait to find out what our policy ends up being. As a board, we make that decision, and then this comes before us again. And I don't think it really makes a difference in anyone's life in their actual day-to-day.
Before Mrs. Andrews and Dr. Robinson, Mrs. Rico?
Just as a matter of guidance and consideration, I would ask through Dr. Fenoy if the number of cases that would be similarly situated from now until January, if that intent is to put them all into abeyance in some way. Because when you pick just one out of the basket, you're going to be inconsistent. And then if that is the intent of the board, I would just want to research whether or not that would be tantamount to waiving a policy. That's my only consideration. I mean, to intentionally defer all pending expulsions under our current policy until we have a new policy.
Mrs. Andrews, then Dr. Robinson, and then Ms. Brill.
And that was exactly what my question was going to be to this board, that we put those in abeyance while we work through this process. And all of us, having had the discussions through legal about the new policy, making recommendations on how we can do better by our children. When you put an expulsion on somebody's record, that's a big deal. So as a result, we know we're almost there, even though the board has not voted on it. I don't know how many children are sitting out in the wings waiting for a meeting here at the school board, but if they're already at Turning Points or another site, they're already serving that time. And so I really want to make sure that we give every child the benefit of getting as much as possible so that they're not actually labeled with an expulsion. If we can do that as a board, I think we need to put those in abeyance, and I don't know if that calls for a motion.
Why don't you hold? There's other
Okay.
board members who'd like to speak. Dr. Robinson, then Ms. Brill.
So let me wait until after.
Okay, Ms. Brill.
Thank you. Excuse me. So I can't believe that I'm going to be the one sitting here saying this, but I do believe that we have rules in place, and these rules and policies are in place at this time. They may change later on, but at the time that these students and this particular student committed this offense, there was a rule, and the punishment is expulsion. So yes, I do think it's harsh. Maybe we explore later on in policy if there's something we can do to take that off a student's record. But I think we have to follow our policies and procedures that are in place at this time. So it is shocking that these words are coming from me, but because usually I'm the first bleeding heart. But I really do think that while the rules are in place, we have to follow them. Thank you.
Dr. Robinson.
Okay. So, however, I think that most of us here on this dais have at some point in time pushed back against rules that we thought were wrong or inappropriate and insisted that this system no longer follow those rules that we think are wrong or inappropriate. In my mind, this is one of them. Now, I have personally never felt that it was appropriate to expel a student because they have a substance use disorder, which is what possession generally means as opposed to intent to sell. So I'm not talking about intent. I'm talking about simple possession, which is what this was, as I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so I would like to offer, well, actually, I think maybe I'm sorry, you have something else? Okay, so then I will wait.
Mrs. Andrews?
We did a lot of digging within other districts, similar size, with the kinds of issues that we have, and we found out that our punishment was really a little bit more egregious as it related to what others were doing around the big 7 school districts in the state of Florida and probably around the country. And this is why we've come up with this new system. So I really do want us, now that we know that we were way off base, based on what we knew and how we did it, let's try to get it right so we can save as many children as we can.
Mrs. Rico?
Thank you. The new proposed policy is something that the Office of General Counsel has proposed. We have presented it as part of last time's workshop, so it's very much supported, discussed with the board, and ready for future development. What concerns me is the process of going against a current policy. I mean, this is just procedure in terms of policy adherence. And so if it is the board's concern that in the future we're going to be doing something, very different that would have a completely different effect on the current state, then I would wholeheartedly suggest that we be allowed to produce some research as to the effect of that in terms of policy and procedure. I mean, when we don't follow a policy, there's typically a waiver process, which is very precise. It just concerns me to have a policy that we are not following in a significant manner. That's my concern.
So, Ms. Rico, if we wanted to start the waiver process in light of the fact that I think all the board members have supported the changes that are going to be made in this policy based on our, and I understand that some of us don't believe that we should waive the policy that's currently in effect, but if we did want to start the waiver process, it's one issue as opposed to the one that's currently here, how long would it take us to get that done?
So there's a precise process for a waiver, and there are precise criteria, and off the top of my head, I cannot remember what exactly that is. Mr. Harris is not here, but that's why I'm asking for some ability to tell you what that is. I'm not even sure a waiver would apply to this situation. And then what are the consequences? That's the legal information I would just like you all to have under consideration before you take this approach, because it wouldn't just apply to this one case, it would apply to many. And that's my concern, just about process.
Dr. Robinson.
So to me, this is about timing, right? So if I think this student in 6 months from now had possession, I suspect that we would not be having this conversation. It kind of reminds me of all the people in prison for possession of substances that were illegal at the time and suddenly became legal, but they're still in prison. And I have a problem with that. So I think that this board has said very clearly that while we think that misbehavior should be corrected, that we want to hold expulsion for the most egregious offenses, right? So I think that, I've been toying in my head with the right procedural method to go about this at this time. And I think that the issue is that we just need to vote it up or down. And if we vote it down, as I'll be voting it down, then it will be left for the superintendent to address administratively. Am I correct?
Yes.
Oh,
Before I call
Got
the
a
other board,
one-word answer from the lawyer?
let me ask a question. Do we know what drug, I don't remember, because there was several expulsions. What kind of drug was involved here?
This was the liquid THC, which is a felony.
Okay. Ms. McQuinn?
Because it was the THC, for one, and exactly the words that Mrs. Brill used. I think this is an egregious enough offense that I certainly would not even want to look into a waiver for this. So I will be voting for this recommendation.
Just so I'm clear, I'm sorry to belabor the issue. I just want to be clear. So it is not possible, legal, that we table this issue until November. It's not possible to do that without getting a waiver.
You can table the issue. I'm just suggesting that if the board chooses to table this expulsion,
the next
and then
50.
you have so many others,
They would all come up in November.
you know.
So let me ask you a question.
So to me, that's not a vote.
Since we're all struggling with this, obviously, some of us agree that, you know, there's a law in place and the law hasn't been changed and he violated the law. We could mitigate. The board can mitigate and allow the student to go back to school in August. Couldn't we? Could we? Ms. Carmona, is that a possibility that this board could mitigate?
Yes, this one does not fall under zero tolerance. The board could also recommend that the student, under current law, be placed in an alternative school setting.
I thought he was in an alternative school setting.
Continue with that placement.
When we talk about mitigation, I thought mitigation was allowing him to go back to school early, back to his home school or whatever other regular public school. So that's not, you're suggesting mitigation is leaving him where he's at?
No, I'm suggesting that that is one of the alternatives, one of the possible outcomes.
Mr. Barbieri, I just want to say, I don't want to go against an existing policy, really, at all. I don't think that's the position that we should be in, to go against a policy. I want this child to stay in an alternative school setting for the remainder of their time. The only issue that I personally have is having it affect the rest of their life, because to me, that's not giving them truly a second chance. So having that expulsion mark is the part that really upsets me. So if legal or anyone sees a way that we could wait to see if the policy is in place for specifically that expulsion, or maybe we go back in time if we change the policy and say retroactive to a year or something. If that's a possibility, I would be open to that, but I don't want to go against a policy today.
I understand. The mitigation would still show up as an expulsion with early admin, so, yeah. Dr. Robinson, did you have your hand up?
No, call the question.
All right, all those in favor of the superintendent's recommendation for expulsion? Opposed? Motion carries 5-2 with Dr. Robinson and Mrs. Andrews in opposition. Mr. Superintendent, do you have anything else?
No, sir, I do not have anything else to add at this time.
We need a motion to adjourn. Motion by Ms. Whitfield, second by Ms. Brill. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. The board